Nearly 8 million Americans have fallen into poverty since the summer. And of course, the pandemic has quite a bit to do with that. Congress's failure to pass another relief package also has quite a bit to do with that. But Congress apparently is expected to agree on a stimulus deal. And I feel weird calling it stimulus because in reality, at this point, it's a survival package for many Americans, millions of Americans, many of whom are either underemployed, unemployed, or have completely gone through their savings accounts as a result of this pandemic. Now, the latest updates on these negotiations seem to be going in the right direction. Although, as Bernie Sanders stated during a recent interview with Wolf Blitzer on CNN, he's still not where he wants to be with this legislation. So here's what we know so far. Senator Joe Manchin, a conservative Democrat and the co-author of a $908 billion bipartisan package, said leadership negotiations are close to agreement on a package that would extend direct payments of perhaps $600 to most Americans. The Washington Post and Bernie Sanders also stated that the one-time direct check to Americans could range anywhere between $600 and $700 for millions of Americans below a certain income threshold. So they will be means tested, and it's still not the same amount that Americans received through the CARES Act, which was a direct payment of $1,200. The number 2 Senate Republican, John Thune of South Dakota, confirmed the likely addition of direct payments in that range, as well as $300 per week in the federal unemployment benefit to partially replace the $600 per week that was extended this summer. Initially, the negotiations indicated that the bill would extend unemployment for about 16 weeks. Now it looks like they've scaled that back to 14 weeks. So there's a lot of give and take happening here. But the whole idea is let's just pass what we can for now until Biden gets elected. I'll get your thoughts on that in just a second, John, because I'm curious what you think. But even Mitch McConnell seems to agree with where negotiations are going, which makes me worry. But he says, we made major headway toward hammering out a bipartisan relief package. I should also note, and this is promising, the current version of the legislation did in fact cut out the liability shield for corporations, which I think is incredibly important. And I think that's probably one of the more positive updates to these negotiations taking place. But John, I wanted you to jump in and share your thoughts on where congressional lawmakers stand right now on this issue.
Really fast on the Mitch McConnell thing. I love that the sort of quote, we've made major headway on this, as if like I'm doing the hard work, when it's basically just,
yeah, I know.
I stopped pushing for an insane corporate liability thing. And I'm actually willing to have people actually get some sort of checks, even if they're incredibly neutered checks. So basically, I backed off of my insane demands, and we're making real headway now. I think we're really accomplishing things, so that's great. Let's definitely talk in a minute about what could possibly happen after Biden gets elected, because that is obviously an interesting question. In terms of from Monday till today, what's happened with the bill, obviously it's moving in a better direction. And I would say a lot of that is probably due to the pressure that the progressives in Congress have been putting on them. There were a lot of great statements yesterday from Representative Jayapal and others about they were not going to vote in favor of something that was masquerading as an aid bill, but didn't actually help regular people. That said, the size of the checks is an insult. The mediocre enhanced unemployment. What I don't understand fundamentally is that we got the CARES Act, which was like a recognition by the government that this is a terrible time in America. People are dying. People need to be saved if they can't afford to go to work, and they can't afford to go to work because there's so many cases and there's so many deaths and it's just too dangerous. Well, it's worse now. Way more people are getting sick every day. More people are dying every day. But the aid is not only delayed by months and months and months, but even now, it's less than what we were having then. It's worse today, and we've already been through all of that. And yet the aid is lower. And what is the excuse? What is the reason for it? Only that they don't want to pay. Because for them, and this is mostly the Republicans, but quite a few of the Democrats as well, like they're not actually really experiencing this pandemic the way the rest of us are. They haven't lost their jobs, they haven't been on unemployment. they're as insulated as anyone can be from getting sick. And the only ones of them who do are largely only doing that because they've exposed themselves willingly because they don't believe that the pandemic is a serious thing. The whole thing is just maddening. And maybe we've made some progress from a few days ago, but it's still largely an insult considering what every American citizen has had to go through so far in 2020.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with you on your analysis on this because look, we don't have the language of the bill in front of us, which is frustrating. Ever since the CARES Act passed, every time they engage in negotiations, it's all, all we can depend on is what we're hearing from the lawmakers themselves. And I'm just always concerned that there are all sorts of, questionable provisions included that end up being incredibly counterproductive, which is certainly what we saw with, the bulk of the stimulus package under the CARES Act helping massive corporations. Even the money that was appropriated for small businesses ended up helping massive corporations instead. And so I'm worried about the language of the bill. You mentioned the spending bill, and let me just clarify that component of it. So Congress needs to pass a spending bill by the end of this week. And what they're planning on doing is attaching the appropriations for the relief bill to the spending bill. The spending bill itself is expected to be $1.4 billion. And so, that's something, it's a must pass bill. And that's why they're continuing to negotiate not only that, but the stimulus, which again, they're gonna attach to it. One thing that I'm also concerned about is that they have cut out funding for state and local government. And that is an issue because people keep thinking that state and local government is just separate from the unemployment benefits that are being offered through this relief package. The truth is state and local government, state government, they're strapped for cash right now because understandably, there's been an influx of people applying for unemployment on a state level. And so those funds need to be replenished. And the way that Republicans are framing this, and I have not seen a good rebuttal to it, an accurate rebuttal to it by Democrats, is that, it's mismanagement by these blue states. No, this is not something that's simply impacting blue states. This is something that's impacting every single state in the US right now, because again, their unemployment programs are being overwhelmed right now with people who have lost their jobs and desperately need money. There's also no talk about retroactive unemployment benefits. There's also no talk about how they're going to, I don't think they are, provide any type of financial relief when it comes to the back rent that people owe. Now, the moratorium is important. No, they're not. I mean, it's insane, right? We're talking about, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars in back rent that landlords are gonna be demanding the second the moratorium is lifted. And do you think those Americans are gonna get any type of relief or any type of help? No. And so, look, Bernie Sanders is right in being against the bill as it's being proposed at this moment. One of our members, Effectos, writes in and actually makes an interesting point by saying Bernie's taking a big risk in the views of optics. If he withholds his vote for the budget and the government shuts down, MSNBC is gonna have a field day blaming him. Well, MSNBC is gonna have a field day with him no matter what he does. Let's just be clear on that. But I do think it's important to have a principled approach on this to ensure that this bill is written in a way that overwhelmingly helps ordinary Americans as opposed to corporations or people who are usually in a position of privilege even during a pandemic. And so we'll see what the outcome is. But then there's, of course, the idea that, let's just do the bare minimum now. And hopefully once Biden's in charge, we can pass a package that's more robust. What do you think about that, John?
I mean, I've just assumed for some time that considering how long it took for the pressure to build between the first pass and this, I've sort of assumed that this is going to be it. And Senator Sanders said that that's not the case. I still find it very hard to believe. I really do. Like, there's so many people, including people in incredibly important positions like Mitch McConnell, that fundamentally don't care. And whether he signs on to something now or not is not some sort of representation of the fact that he's shifted on that. He apparently thinks that it's necessary. A lot of people believe that the only reason he's pushing through anything and right now and is willing to allow there to be direct payments, is that in theory it might help in Georgia for the Republicans there to be able to say that they got something done, and that might be true. But then once that pressure is gone, and in theory passing anything would reflect positively on the Biden administration, I just don't see it. And let's say that hypothetically Georgia goes the way we want and the Democrats take over, we still have to assume that going forward there is going to be an automatic, unstated, and not needed to be actually performed filibuster on literally every piece of legislation the Dems put forward. I don't understand why it would be any different than that. I don't know. Do you think that there's a chance?
No, I actually agree with you. I think that Mitch McConnell is still going to serve as an obstacle. If he doesn't serve as an obstacle and somehow Democrats do win those 2 runoff races in Georgia, I mean, Joe Manchin has raised his hand and said on multiple occasions that he plans on being an obstacle to what Democrats want to pass. And I think that's an issue. And when you look at what Joe Manchin has been very willing to accept in this relief package, it's certainly concerning because he seems to be in favor of the corporate liability shield, which is absolutely disgusting and disastrous. I also want to correct a mistake I made earlier. I talked about the spending bill. The spending bill is 1.4 trillion, not billion dollars. However, in that spending bill, as it stands today, this is the thing that made me want to rip my hair out today. There's $1.4 billion appropriated for Donald Trump's border wall. But why?
In case COVID comes creeping over, for no reason. It's just incredibly frustrating. And look, I get that,
progressives might take a hit in terms of demanding more, but look, we got to decide what we want progressives to do. Do we want them to actually fight for better legislation, or are we going to go after them if they do fight for legislation and it looks bad optics wise? I don't know what the correct answer is. I know that I personally want them to fight for more. And look, they have been fighting for more and they've gotten some of the concessions, including the direct checks to Americans. And I think that's important. But there's also the issue of people needing relief right now and they're not getting it. It's insane that it's taken so long to even get, this far in another relief bill. And as the Washington Post reports, the poverty rate jumped 11.7% in November, up 2.4 percentage points since June. That's according to the new data that's been released by researchers at the University of Chicago and the University of Notre Dame. I should note again, just to reiterate, 8 million Americans, nearly 8 million Americans have slipped into poverty since the past summer. So these numbers are stark, they're devastating, people are desperate. And what we're seeing right now by Congress, especially Republican lawmakers, is a level of cruelty that just absolutely blows my mind. It's incredible that some of these people keep getting reelected when they've turned their backs on their own constituents over and over again, especially during this time of crisis.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.